Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off XL, where in November of 1993 we have a varied mix of games and software from the 5 big Amiga magazines to check out. And in this episode we will be looking at CU Amiga, the one for Amiga, Amiga Power, Amiga Action and Amiga Format. Fight! And we start with Amiga Power, who put 3 demos and a PD title across 2 discs. And we start with Brutal Sports Football, a violent future fantasy take on football mixed with a bit of rugby and American football. Think Speedball, but played sideways and with a fantasy style rather than sci-fi, and you'll get the idea. But this doesn't feel quite as smooth as Speedball, and I don't think it's quite as playable. But even with these future sports games, I've never been the best at them. The demo also feels a little broken in places. I had it crash or just get a bit weird. But between all that, I could see how they doubled down on the violence, with you being able to punch and kick the other team. I was even able to take one of their heads and throw it like a ball. To aid you in all this, there are weapons and armour for you to find, like swords and bombs. But this demo is of the sensible soccer kind, as in, as soon as you score a goal, that's it, game over. Which is really annoying for a sports title. This is something that you should check out if you enjoy Speedball and want something a bit different, but it's not one that I would probably return to. Much like the next demo, which is for Fat Man. Yes, the cake consumer himself is here in demo form. And this is one of the later levels in the game. Now, I've always felt that this was a bit of a one-joke game that was dragged out across an entire title, as your main attack is a Chuck Rock style gut punch, but you do have a few others like being able to belch or throw carrots. Even if for the most part they don't always seem to do much against the enemies. Now that chicken you can see on the HUD, well, that's obviously your health. But visually you don't get much reaction when you get hurt, so it might just very quickly go down and then you die. And added to all of this, this game is a collect 'em up, where you have to collect all the items in the level to be able to progress. Do you know what the items are? No! Do they show it on the HUD? No! It's just a number, and it tells you how many you still need to find. I think it's obvious to say I'm not a fan of this one, and this demo, that would have cemented my opinion not to go near it. Power's only PD game, on the other hand, is amazing, as it's Atoms. Yes, this was the game that inspired me to make my own versions of it and then release it across a number of different platforms. Well, it wasn't from this magazine, I got it from Amiga Format, but it is the exact same game, with the funky music and lovely animations. This can be played with 2 to 4 players, but only against other people, which was annoying as no one really wanted to play this against me. But if you don't know how to play this game, then each player takes it in turn to place an atom on the grid, and these can be placed on empty squares or on top of your own. The max number you can place on a square is based on the number of squares directly around it, so above and below and to the sides. When that number is met, it will go critical and send those atoms to the neighbouring squares and take them over. All this is in aid of the main goal, which is, well, to wipe out all the other players. So triggering large chain reactions that try and take over large amounts of the grid at once is where you really want to try and go for. This is a great PD game, and it's weird that it didn't show up in more compilations. The last thing for Amiga Power is the very special Cannon Fodder Plus. This is a very interesting demo for Cannon Fodder, because it also acts like a bit of a dev diary for the game, as there's 4 stages and each one shows the progress that they had been making. Stage 1 has the basic engine with a few tile types like grass, trees and water, but it doesn't have any of the fancy things like corners. And all we've got is a single soldier to move around in a way that would actually feel pretty normal for anyone who played the final game. And to complete this mission, you just got to try and find the one single enemy that's hidden and take them out. Phase 2 has a more complete look with its graphics, and we now have a squad of 3 to use. And there's many more enemies to deal with. But thankfully there are also now grenades that you can throw. Phase 3 and 4, well, they continue this theme, but we now have huts that will spawn baddies that you have to deal with, as well as traps. And you might even see the odd helicopter. It's cool to see this same level, but with increasing amounts of detail added to it as they went along. There is also the sensible quiz, with pictures taken from the Cannon Fodder music video, with a few of them gored up just for good measure. And you can click on the various members of the team and some of the pictures around the side to learn more about them, as well as to be asked questions. It's a fun if bloody addition to the disc, but it all feels very much cannon fodder and sensible software. The next magazine is UK Amiga, that included 2 applications, 2 music tracks, 2 images of the month, as well as 2 demos, and a single intro, all across 2 discs. Those 2 music tracks are cool enough, which can also be said of those 2 pictures of the month. Though interestingly, they didn't mention either of them in the magazine, or even the virus checker that they put on the disc, that can scan discs, files, or even your memory for a number of different viruses, or specifically the Saddam damage virus, which wasn't one that I know of, but considering it's front and centre, I guess it must have been a big deal at the time. I think the lack of documentation might have been due to the fact they needed all the space in the magazine to explain Expert Draw, the full free art package that they included. And from first glance, this looks like it should be quite powerful, as it's a vector-based art package. As while you can draw lines in freehand mode, afterwards it will convert it to a vector, so you can then select it with the right tool and then move the various points around. And because it's all points, you can even rotate the whole thing around to any direction that you like. Now by default it will show just a simple wireframe of what you're working on, which means just the lines, but you can turn that off to see what it would look like filled. But also by default, it will show it as shades of black and white. If you want to know what the end result will look like, then you have to turn off all these options and you can finally see them in colour. Now this is all done to keep the program running quite quickly, but I think you really should be checking out the colour view quite often. Overall, this is an interesting art package, but I think I do prefer using raster packages like Deluxe Paint, because even though you can do some of the nice smooth zooming on this, I don't find it quite as useful, particularly if I'm trying to do that artwork for something else, like make a game. The intro that they included is very special, as it's the one for Frontier Elite 2, a game that I put a lot of time into. Most of which was just trying to learn how to play the game due to not having a manual for various reasons. These days this intro has gone on to become very important, because what else are you going to boot up when you've put a new accelerator in your Amiga? Because the faster your computer was, the smoother this ran. Because as we can see on a stock A500, it's not the best. There are moments in this that you could probably count the frames per minute on your fingers. But damn, is this still an amazing intro. I used to boot the game up just to watch this sometimes. So having this on a disc before having the full game, yeah, I would have spent a lot of time watching this one. Their first playable demo is for Magic Boy, a platform game that's a bit of a mix of Bubble Bubble and Rainbow Islands, as you have to use your magic wand to stun the baddies, at which point you can collect them and put them in your magic sack. But if you keep them in there too long, they will try and escape and kill you. So what you have to do is push down on the joystick, which will then throw them off the bottom of the screen and put them into jail. Why they don't go there directly when you walk over them? I have no idea. You don't seem to get more points by holding them there for longer, or get even more if you have multiple baddies collected at once. So I'm honestly not sure. To complete a level, you obviously have to capture all of them and then put them all into their cells. It's a very colourful game, but I feel it's let down a little by its platforming, as by 1993 I would have thought they would have had this down a little bit better. The movement doesn't feel as good as you might hope. It works, but it's not great. But overall this is a fun little game, and it has a bunch of levels in the demo, which is nice. So it helps show off the range of baddies and pickups that you'll have, as well as the number of floor types. The last demo for CU Amiga is Quack, another platformer, but this one is of the single screen style. And the goal is simple: collect all the keys to open up the exit. But getting them all is made tricky by the number of baddies that will get in your way, as well as the time limit that won't instantly kill you, but it will make your life so much harder when there's stuff falling from the sky. Thankfully, baddies can be dealt with by throwing eggs at them, but you only have a limited number of those, so you'll have to pick up either dedicated items to get more, or keep going until you finish the level, and then the fruit that you've collected can be traded up for more eggs. Now as you go, you will find power-ups that might make your eggs harder, so you'll have to throw less of them to take out a baddie, or pots that will give you armour, so you can take more than a single hit. It's a fun game that plays well, but it does get very tricky on the later levels. There's also more strategy than you might expect, as the baddies are blocked in by the items, but those will also block your eggs. So you might want to try and work out a plan so you can collect everything, while also trying to keep some of those enemies locked away for as long as possible. If you've not played this one before, give it a go. But it's not a game you're going to complete quickly, either the full thing or this demo, as the number of levels in both are larger than you might expect. Moving on, we have the one for Amiga, with its 3 discs, 3 demos and a PD title to look at. And on the first disc, we start with the classic Uridium 2. It's an excellent game that I've reviewed in the past, and we've also seen a demo for this previously as well. But this is interestingly a different level to what we've seen before, as it's actually one of the later ones, a much later one. So what is an already difficult game is made so much harder for this demo. The goal, if you don't know, is to take out this huge dreadnought that you're flying across. This is done by damaging it, either by shooting the deck-mounted guns or getting the bomb upgrades so you can attack it directly. You can also collect tokens that are dropped by some of the craft that you can take out. But eventually, well, if you manage to survive that is, it will tell you to land now. But this is made so much more difficult by the number of walls and attack craft that will try and get you. If you do get that message, then you'll hightail it across the dreadnought to try and find the landing zone, and then you get to attack the core. Now this is made more tricky due to how gravity works and momentum. But just getting to that point is going to be extremely difficult if you've not played this game before, as this level does not go easy on you at all. I really do question if it was a good idea to put this level into this demo, because I can imagine quite a few people would have thought this game was just brutally hard and given up on it, even if it's a lovely looking game that runs really well. If you don't think it's playable enough due to how difficult it is, you're not going to give it another chance. The second demo they have is for Heroes Quest 2. Now, I've not played much of this or the original. To be honest, I've mostly played the demo that we saw in a previous episode. But this does look like its UI got a big revamp between the games. I'm not sure if the game itself did, because previously we were in a dungeon and we had a larger party and we had to try and work them towards a set of stairs to go down to the next level. Here we just have two characters, and we're going around this area that has nice grass and trees and trying to go through this castle. The game itself is turn-based, where we have a number of action points, and that's shown by the wheel that you can see on the right. You can use those action points to move around, which is shown by the number of steps you have on the left, but also for attacking and casting magic. You can move using the compass or by clicking on a square in the main playing area. You'll also get to use each character in turn, and then afterwards you get to wait to see what the enemy is going to try and do to you. All in all, this actually looks quite nice, and it does seem to be well designed. So I'll definitely have to check this out more at some point in the future. But I think I said the exact same thing about the original Heroes Quest. So who knows, maybe this time I'll actually do it. The PD game they included is Project Buzzbar, a weird name for a game that's a bit of a cross between Asteroids and Defender, as you whiz around this landscape in a craft that has its own momentum. But it's not only imparted by your engines, but also your firepower, so just shooting will make you move around. To complete the waves, you'll have to take out the enemy craft that you'll see flying around. But while doing all this, you might also see some people that you can also pick up. This is a fast and fun PD game that was actually made in Blitz Basics 2. This is based on the source code that you actually see scrolling up on the screen at the very start. And this isn't the last time we'll be seeing Blitz Basics 2, but you'll have to wait for more on it. As next, we have a demo for Seek and Destroy, a game that we've seen previously, but I did find it fun to play, so let's check it out again. Because this actually seems more like something you'd see on the Super Nintendo than the Amiga, due to having its Mode 7 look about it, as the whole world rotates around you while you fly around in your helicopter. But this isn't the easiest game I've ever played, as you move around quite fast, but they can attack you even faster. And the only thing that's even faster than that is how quickly your armor goes down. That's not your only issue, as you have limited ammo for most of your weapons, and you also have limited fuel. So in a way, this is very much like a top-down Desert Strike. So you will have to be on the lookout for the crates that you can find by destroying some of the buildings, but you'll have to land to pick them up. And with everything else that's going on around you at the time, it's not the easiest thing. Now, I do find this an interesting game, but I do hope the full thing starts off a little bit easier and gives you a chance to get going. But why do I have a feeling that this might be very indicative of the full title? The next magazine is Amiga Action, that had just 2 demos across 2 discs, with the first being Theatre of Death. Not a title that I remember playing, or even remember hearing about before. But what surprised me when I did check it out is how similar it seems to be to Cannon Fodder. Now, you might think this came out afterwards, but they came out roughly the same time, so I don't think it's a copycat. But they might have looked at earlier screenshots and decided to do something similar. Or it might just be one of those cases where 2 similar games come out at round about the same time. But this does do a few things differently enough that you know it's not a complete copy. Because in this one we have a much larger squad, that you are a part of. And those other members, well, they're controlled by the computer, and you can give them very loose orders. The main goal seems to be very similar, as in you have to go out and take out all the enemies and their bases. And at first glance you might think it controls pretty much the same, but it has this really weird scrolling system. It's just difficult to describe and absolutely annoying to use. There's also this slightly confusing HUD that lets you switch between different weapons, but it also lets you jump between some of your different units. And if you manage to take over a helicopter, then you can also use it to land, but only at set points. And the HUD doesn't really indicate any of that. What you also have is a very limited amount of ammo, and so you'll have to top them up by collecting boxes. But I found that the AI controlled army just tended to walk over them first, not giving you a chance. The whole thing just felt really clunky and not fun at all to play. And I got the exact same feeling when I played Action's next game, as it's Graham Gooch's second innings. An expansion pack, I believe, for Graham Gooch's cricket, that lets you play some historical match from 1963 or something, and just reading about it in the magazine put me to sleep, and playing the demo, it just about ended me. I don't really enjoy most sports games, but cricket, it has even less appeal than most. But thankfully, I could just let the computer play itself, so I didn't even have to interact with it. But saying all that, it does look nice enough. There's some nice touches of animation, and the whole thing seems to be presented well. But as you can imagine, I don't really care for this. But I guess the original game must have done well enough for them to release this add-on pack. The last magazine of the month is Amiga Format, that gave away a full program, 4 PD games, as well as a demo, all across just 2 discs. And jumping into that full program, it's Blitz Basic 2. A simple yet powerful programming system. Being similar in many ways to Amos, this was used for many PD games, but also a number of commercially released titles. And being a new programming language, even if it's one that's similar to BASIC, it required Format dedicating 10 pages of the magazine to it. And they continued to give more tutorials in the following months. Included on the disc is some example code, which we've been checking out, and as we can see, it includes both graphics as well as desktop libraries. On top of all that, there's even a debugger that will help you when the code fails. Which it did when I decided to get my snorkers on and type in some of the code that they had in the magazine. As I actually managed to find my copy of it, and like many first attempts at typing these in, the results weren't quite right. I might have messed up some of the maths code, or it could have been the data tables, which to be honest, were written by someone who hated its readers. Why would you write out fractionals with a leading 0 in some places and without it in others? They didn't even justify the table to make it easy to read. And in digging into the development environment trying to get all of this to work, I did find the commands that allowed you to compile and run, and you can even make some very cool things with the basic code that they provided in this month's magazine. This should have been something that I would have played around with back in the day, as I did have that copy of Amiga Format. But I guess being 12 years old at the time, I wasn't quite ready to start making games, even if I really wanted to. And to show off how good Blitz Basics 2 was, they provided 2 PD games written in the language, the first of which is a remake of the classic Defender. I'm not sure there's anything new that I can say about this game, but you do fly around the map as you would expect, shooting at the aliens that are trying to kidnap the humans. So you can either try and stop them before it happens, or you can rescue them as they're being taken up to the sky. This all moves very fast and smoothly considering it was made in a language that has BASIC in its name. So it really helps to show that you don't need to worry too much that it's going to produce slow or bad code. Now, I'm sure you could have done much better if it was written in C or assembly, but I wager it was a lot faster to write it in Blitz. The other game was Zombie Apocalypse, a game so bloody that they had to put an over 15 sticker on it. Which obviously I completely ignored at the time, as would have done every other 12-year-old. Because this is really just a simple rail shooter. And zombies will show up and you have to shoot them. Those moving across the screen need to be taken out before they reach the other side, as if they do that, then they'll cause damage to you. But the others, they just pop up and down. Now you do have limited ammo, but boxes will rain down from the sky and you can hit them to get more. And the basic goal is just to take out a set number of zombies. But you don't know how many that is, until you get close enough to the end goal, and then it'll flash up with 3 more to finish. You do also have another item, which is the grenades that will take out everything on screen. Now this is a fun if simple game, and outside of damaging the zombies, there really isn't all that much interesting about it, but it is a fun, if for 5 minutes style game. Before we check out the rest of the PD, there is something else across these discs. Patches. 5 of them in total. For a whole range of different games from different publishers. And all of these were to fix up titles that wouldn't run on AGA machines. And as the internet back then wasn't accessible to everyone, getting these on cover discs was definitely the way to go. So even back in 1993, we had to deal with patching our games. And going back to the PD, we have 2 more that were not made in Blitz. The first is Mega Worm, an interesting take on the old Snake game. This has a single player mode where you just have to go around collecting pills to make yourself longer, but there are also coloured ones that will show up that might make you faster or slower, or even make you shorter. There's also some interesting 2-player modes, and these items might change the colours of the worms or even reverse each other's controls. Gameplay wise, this seems to be a well enough done little game, as there are multiple levels for you to deal with. But there are a number of 1 and 2 player modes for you to check out. Graphically wise though, it is very basic, but do you really need more than that for a Snake game? The last PD game is Amiganoid, a game we got to look at in my Amiga's answer to Arkanoid video, which gives you a hint at the type of game this is. Yes, it's a block breaking game, but with the twist that there's 2 paddles, so you have to worry about the right hand wall as well as the floor. This was made by the developers of Pinball Dreams, and it includes a number of screen layouts, most of which are fun. And there are quite a few of them, so it's not going to be a game that you're going to finish quickly. But you can definitely tell that this was from a set of developers who knew their way around making a game, as it's nicely polished and just looks decent enough. The final demo for the month is Overdrive, Team 17's top-down racing game. That pretty much just dumps you straight into the action. You are up against 2 other cars as you race around this single track, over 8 laps. Now there is money to collect as well as turbo pads to hit, although the money itself isn't useful in the demo, but the turbos are. There are some traps that you'll have to deal with, such as an oil slick near the ending that you'll have to cross. But interestingly, it seems to also affect the other cars, which is nice as I've played enough racing games that had the AI cars just drive through obstacles like they never existed. But this also means that they get a boost from those turbo pads, so you will have to be on it if you want to try and get a first place. This is a fun if limited demo due to the single track, but we do get music, sound effects, and the odd speech sample. And with that, we're at the end of another episode. And all we've got left is my rundown of my top 3 bits of software. And in third place, I'm gonna give it to Frontier Elite 2. Yes, it's just the intro, but considering how many times I've watched that over the years, even when I had the full game, this had to be here. In second place, I'm going to give it to Hero Quest 2. It's an interesting looking game that I think I really should put more time into it. And in first place, I'm gonna give it to Blitz Basics 2. I really should have put far more time into this back in the day when I got it with my copy of Amiga Format, but looking at it now, I still see that it's a great bit of software, and it could be used now to make Amiga games. As always, let me know what you think of my rankings, and if you had any of these magazines in the comments. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was da 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 dun, dun 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 dun, da 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 dun. And this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. It's great checking out these games that I never had a chance to before. Even if they aren't always the best, they are fun to see. And that is the best part of doing these episodes, as I never know what I'm going to find. And if you enjoyed this and you haven't subscribed, then maybe you should do so you'll know about future episodes. Or you can check out some of the videos that you can see on the screen right now.